Hi, good morning everyone. We're finally going to be going into the rainforest, and this is just a little overview of what it looks like and some primary producers that are in there. So right now we are looking for the Peneron Piangu Piausu Mamu. The first thing that we've actually come upon is the moringa, and it's basically a braided tree system. And so you can see there how it's not all one consecutive kind of trunk. It has like different types of, it like almost looks as if there's small trees within one tree. Yeah, and this is one of the primary producers in this rainforest, and it's most commonly found in Singapore, Malaysia, and Borneo. So with this tree, it has flowers on the top of where its leaves are, and it has some fruits which are short wings of the tree, and the flowers get pollinated by the birds around in the ecosystem. So we were actually intending to go down this way, but for some reason it's unavailable and closed because there's tree works in progress. So the next species we found in the environment, but it is called the Ficus villosa, which is also a shaggy leafed fig. This Ficus villosa has a mutualistic plant-pollinator relationship with the figs and wasps, which means like these two organisms have co-evolved and worked together basically, where each species can benefit from their relationship together. So in this case, certain species of the wasps are required to pollinate and can only reproduce in certain species of figs, which provide them for developing the young. This species is nationally extinct and critically endangered. So it's important that we bring awareness to not only the species, but to the fact that there is some still in Singapore that we should protect, not cause any further disturbance to this particular species. Okay, so I don't know if you guys can hear this noise. This butterfly. So those are the cicadas in Singapore. Cicadas have a very short lifespan, and so basically the mothers give birth while they're on trees, and then they fall from the tree, from the branch, and they burrow underground, and that's where they spend a majority of thetheir life. So cicadas actually help benefit the ecosystem here because they birth on the branches of the trees, which weakens the branch, and on it the branch just falls down, so therefore the tree does not have to have any more energy expenditure on that particular branch, so the tree doesn't use as much energy on those branches. Okay, based off a little bit of research we just did, we were able to find the links between the cicadas and the majority of the ecosystem. So basically, the trees obviously use the sunlight to produce food for themselves through photosynthesis, and then the cicadas take the nutrients from the trees, which also then weakens the branches so that they don't have to spend the energy, as Christy just said. And then from there, the critters take the energy from the cicadas, so they eat them, they get their energy from the cicadas, and the alpha predators, so also known as the apex predator, they will get or secondary consumer, they will get their energy from the cicadas. Okay, so as Kelsey and I were walking around, we saw this tree that fell, and we can classify this as a disturbance to the ecosystem. So although this is a disturbance to the ecosystem because the tree obviously is now dead and not photosynthesizing and producing oxygen for the ecosystem, it also could help to fit a niche for other organisms that fungi and decomposers can live on, and the underside of the tree here. And so because the tree is now obviously not functioning and like not photosynthesizing, although the tree is dead, it is now able to fit new niches for the ecosystem, such as decomposers can grow in it. And as the tree, as you can see here, you can see the tree is a bit elevated above the ground. This can be considered a new habitat for other types of species and smaller organisms that might want to live underneath there. This actually is a red ginger plant. There is rarely any kind of fruit on this. As you can see, it like buds off from the center here, and it splits out into the red petals. So there's normally not any fruits. However, there are medical uses for this, so rather than directly contributing to the ecosystem, it then contributes to humans. We can very clearly see that there are a ton of mosquitoes, which we know are often common in rainforest environments.
And so the relationship that my legs have, that my body has with the actual mosquitoes is a parasitic relationship. I, the human, is negatively affected by my relationship with the mosquito, which is benefited straight by them consuming the blood in my body. Basically, the mosquito gets its food and its nutrients, whereas I am exposed to many other diseases because the mosquito has entered my bloodstream. Okay, so although we didn't end up seeing every single species here that we intended to see, we are now just going to sit down and kind of explain to you the actual species and food chain that we did research that is still like prevalent inside of the Botanical Gardens rainforest ecosystem. It's just we might have just not been able to see it on a particular day.
So the first one is again the tree that I mentioned in the beginning. Also, sorry if my pronunciation is very, very off. Some of the names I would love to be able to say, but they're a little bizarre, so I'm just gonna try and say it again. The Pian Ron Piangu Piasu Mamu, which is also the Horsephilia iria. So this is found either in swamps or riverines and where the climate is high, so obviously like a tropical environment. And we didn't go as far as we could into the tropical sort of rainforest ecosystem because part of it was cut off, but there was a water system where it was cut off, so that would also be the reason for those plants to kind of be around that area. You know, swamps have a lot of water and such. And swamps are also home to a lot more mosses, which we saw a lot of on all the trees. There were a lot of green mosses which covered the barks of trees. So obviously it's a tree, so it's able to take in the photons from the sun and then photosynthesize food for itself. And then from there are flowers and fruits which grow on the trees. So then this tree is a very valuable source for the other consumers in the environment, particularly the herbivore animals. So this would be a herbivory relationship, which just means that it all has to do structured around plants because they only eat it. So an example of this would be the macaques in Singapore, or the monkeys. So it has a very valuable, it's very valuable food-wise for the monkeys and the hornbills, which Christy is just about to talk about.
Okay, once again, I don't know if I'm saying this right, but I'm gonna be talking about the Oriental pied hornbill, and from my research that I gathered, I'm pretty sure this might be the keystone species in a certain food chain. I'm not saying in the food web, but in the food chain that we studied. So the reason why I said that I think this is a keystone species in the environment is because it feeds off of all of the species that are in the food chain that we studied. The hornbill is actually an omnivore just like us, so it eats plants and animals. And Oriental hornbill is actually found usually eating the fruit that grows on the primer producer that Kelsey just explained. It's also found feeding on smaller animals, which we're going to go into in a bit.
So now I will be talking about the changeable lizard, which I'm sorry if I butchered the name again. It's the Colotis versicolor. And so the changeable lizards are the secondary consumers. So they mainly eat insects such as crickets or grasshoppers. And then also in the case of a rainforest, we would most likely assume that they'd be eating the mosquitoes because they're small. And also if they're close to the water, then the larvae would be in the water. They eat small vertebrates. And so the lizard itself is classified as the Oriental garden lizard, or an Oriental garden lizard. And then in terms of humans going into these ecosystems, it would benefit them as they are getting rid of the really small insects, the flies, the mosquitoes, the crickets that are annoying pests to us. And that would also be a reason for containing the population size and keeping it down.
I'm going to be talking about the common Southeast Asian tree frog. And its scientific name, I'm going to butcher this again, is the Polypedates leucomystax. So this frog is actually unpoisonous. Their coloring, yeah. We can know that because of their coloring. Usually poisonous animals like to show bright colors as to show that they're poisonous and to kind of warn other animals to not mess with them in a simpler sense. And this is actually called aposematism. And once again, like the changeable lizard, it also feeds off of other insects in the area, which helps benefit other animals and heterotrophs in the ecosystem, because insects once again open them up and make individuals more susceptible to disease. So this also helps benefit the ecosystem by getting rid of bugs and mosquitoes that may actually be detrimental to other heterotrophs. And because they have competition for the same types of species and they want to fit the same niche, whichever one is best adapted to attain that food will most likely survive in their competition due to, as explained by Darwin's theory of evolution, natural selection.
However, there are still both of these species, so we do know that there are obviously other food sources that they're getting food from. If they had the exact same food source, they wouldn't be able to live in the same environment, and we know this through the bacteria explanation we talked about in the parameciums.
The first primary consumer that we're going to be talking about is called the common birdwing, and the scientific name for this, once again, as always, I don't really know how to pronounce it, but it's called the Troides Helena seborrhous, and it feeds off of the tree that we just talked about, the Horsfield area, because it feeds off of the nectar from the tree, as well as it can also eat the tree sap and the pollen or rotting fruit. And
there's a commensalism relationship, which just means that one benefits and one doesn't, and that's obviously between the fungi and the tree, because fungi doesn't really do anything for a tree, but it obviously provides a habitat for that species and that fungi. And so this again is another primary consumer. However, this one doesn't typically eat off of the tree, but it does eat off of some of the other smaller kind of insects and everything. The blue spotted flatwing fly feeds off of typically bloodworms, insect larvae. So this is obviously a commensalism relationship because the plant doesn't really benefit in any way from having these butterflies on them. And we do know that this would make sense because we do know that butterflies typically take the nectar from plants. That's one of the food sources from them. So it would make sense for these newly hatched butterflies to then have their first food source be the host plant.
Okay, so we are now leaving the botanical gardens, and we'll see you guys on our next venture when we go to McRitchie Reservoir.